Hey guys, Godfather of Anxiety here again. I just wanted to do a video today about my battle with clinical depression. I've alluded to this, I've done depression videos in the past. This will be a little bit more specific as to things that I personally experienced while being clinically depressed. For those of you who watched my channel, who either know somebody or who are clinically depressed, you know exactly how difficult this condition is to deal with and how life-changing it is. So one of the first things I'm going to do before I get into exactly my experience, and I think it's really important that I touch on this, and that's understanding the difference between being depressed or down and being clinically depressed. All of us battle adversity in life, and this isn't just small things, right? Like we lose, we have relationships end, we lose loved ones who pass away. These are traumatic things, and they can actually spin you into a clinical depression. But most of the time, as bad as the feelings that we experience are when these traumatic things happen, they don't generally, at least for a neurotypical person, they don't devolve into a full-blown clinical depression. They can change us forever. These types of losses leave an indelible mark on who we are as a person and our outlook for the rest of our lives. I'm not trying to diminish that at all. But clinical depression is a very specific physiological disorder. And, as much as these events can lead to somebody who's already, susceptible to becoming clinically depressed, they can lead to that. They generally don't cause it in people who are neurotypical. Why I mention this before I start talking about what I went through, you'll hear a lot of people, and I trust me guys, I feel for you. A lot of people who say, well, if you're down, you just got to get up, If life hands you lemons, you make lemonade. All these cliche things that are well-meaning, right? Come on, just get up, just start living. You can't just sit here and set it out and these things. It's not that this is bad advice. It's just that they do not understand that the nature and the causation of clinical depression has to do with certain neurotransmitters. So what ends up happening is, sometimes when people tell us stuff like that, it can make us feel even worse because we can feel like they're right. But when you're clinically depressed, now I'm going to go through what you experience with clinical depression and how it is completely different from being down or from being just in a depressed state. Clinical depression, I have described it in my videos as emotional death. I'll read some of these symptoms and then I'll explain to you guys some of what I went through. Sadness, tearfulness, emptiness, and hopelessness. And these feelings are not fleeting feelings. These are feelings that dominate your day and your dominant mental attitude. You feel, frequently, I felt lost. I felt empty. I felt completely unmotivated. Also, another thing you'll notice, your mood stability will suffer. You'll get angry really quickly for no good reason. You might be yelling and screaming 1 second, and the next second you might be sobbing like a baby. And there is not going to be a logical cause for either one of these things. So this is where it starts to get really scary. This is where clinical depression starts to get really scary, because for me, I had, about 32 and a half years without a real deep clinical depression. And so when it happened, it is frightening. It's frightening not to, okay, here's some more symptoms. Loss of interest or pleasure in most or all normal activities. This includes things like your love life, hobbies, sports. So in other words, things that you do to give yourself a boost, right? Things that, just maybe they're those things that just help you deal with the monotony of everyday life. They give you a little, for me, I enjoy sports. You tune into a game. When I was clinically depressed, I experienced zero joy from anything like that. I experienced zero joy from anything like that. Another big thing, sleep disturbances. So I think more even than anxiety, clinical depression is going to mess with your sleep. And it can go to either extreme. When I was clinically depressed, there were times I didn't get more than 3 hours of sleep for a week or two, each night I'm speaking of. And which, by the way, is devastating to your physical and mental health. And then there's other times when you can't get out of bed and you literally will sleep an entire day away. And it will make no sense. Here's another thing, I always touch on how we're intelligent people with these conditions, these anxiety conditions. We're intelligent people, we're analytical. We're trying to figure out, why do we feel this way? How come I cared so deeply about everything and things made me feel so good and so conversely so sad? So, we have big feelings, we have big hearts. And now all of a sudden, it's like someone stole our soul. That's what clinical depression is like. Appetite. Unfortunately for me, I was one of those people who tried to soothe my clinical depression by eating. And this is how I ended up weighing 365 pounds. Some people won't eat when they're clinically depressed. It can go either way. You're also cognitively, your ability to think clearly and think deeply it's like you had a lobotomy. Clinical depression will make you feel like you had a lobotomy. So it's so weird. I noticed memory issues. And again, things, that I really would think deeply on or meditate on, no ability. I felt like, I felt like I say, someone stole like 50 IQ points. It was really scary. And then you combine this with the fact that you're not feeling right either. Your feelings aren't right. So now your thoughts and your feelings are affected from clinical depression. It's very, very frightening. Your self-esteem you will not have any self-esteem. You're going to feel worthless. You're going to feel guilty. You're going to feel just, and this is what, guys, what this leads to in people. I don't need to tell you. You guys are smart. We've lost a lot of people to clinical depression. You know that. That's happened. That's a real thing. I have always viewed life as a tremendous gift. And I have cherished every second I've had on this earth. But clinical depression actually brought me to the point of contemplating not being here anymore. I actually contemplated it. Now, I didn't plan anything. I didn't perseverate on it like people with that type of ideation do. Thank God. But it was there. And, this is from a person, that's the antithesis of who I am. Like I said, I view this life as a gift, every second of it. And it brought me to the point, it brought me so far to my knees that, I felt like maybe it wasn't worth it. Maybe the people in my life, especially my loved ones, would be better off if I weren't here. That's what clinical depression can do. So I want to get that, before I start talking specifically about how this went for me, maybe from a kind of a chronological standpoint, I wanted to get that out there to understand the severity of clinical depression, and that it's not something that you can just give somebody a pep talk on. It's not something that you can just get over it. When it's taken hold to the point where it needs treatment, where it becomes clinical, you are going to need you're going to need time, and you're going to need treatment to get out of it. Now, one good thing about depression is that it usually ebbs and flows. So that's why, if I can tell, if you get anything from this video, get that if you do happen to be in a clinical depression right now, it's not going to last. Guys, it's not going to last. You will get your soul back. You'll get your feelings back. It might take longer than you want it to or feel like you can bear, but you will. And it'll be worth it. It will be worth it. As much as I went through when I was clinically depressed, I am so grateful that I didn't throw in the towel. I didn't throw my hand. And the joys and happiness that I've experienced since then have been so worth it compared to what I would have given up had I given up. So it's not forever. You're not going to feel this way forever, or, not feel anything the way you do maybe right now forever. That's not the way it's going to work. You'll get it back. Again, it might not be linear either. And you might have to take a medication to help get you going in the right direction to the point where you can start to feel again. It all depends. But this is where you need to seek the help of a mental health professional and get yourself on the road to recovery. So I do think, now just getting into my personal experience here, my battle with the clinical depression, I do think during puberty, I do think I had about 6 months or a year where I could have been diagnosed as being clinically depressed. I had some family issues going on, combined with just the, horrible nature of middle school and children that age, and, being, a chubby kid, and, all the different things that go into it. There was a probably about a 6 month to a year time where my life really was kind of affected. Like, you want to find a place where you can just kind of hide or let your guard down or relax or be yourself. And for about 6 months to a year, when I was 12 or 13, I couldn't get that. So technically, that was probably my first bout of clinical depression, but I wasn't diagnosed, and it certainly paled in comparison to what I experienced later on, which was life-changing and, right up there with, derealization and panic attacks and things of that nature as to the scariest things that have ever happened to me. Intrusive thoughts, clinical depression is right up there. And those things can overlap. And in my case, they did. So it was a nightmare. But as I told you guys, in 2003, I started having panic attacks, May of 2003. And it continued. I was looking for a physiological cause. I was having panic attacks pretty much daily. And then I started to have, maybe 6 months into it, I started to have intrusive thoughts. And then after about a year and a half of having constant panic attacks and intrusive thoughts, I started to become clinically depressed. And this was really scary because, I feel very deeply. I'm what you would call somebody with a big heart, an empath, whatever you want to call it. That's what I am. That's what I've always been, for better or for worse. And I do wear my emotions on my sleeve. But during that time, I started to notice that even people that were close to me, I wasn't feeling the way I normally felt. Now, I want to be very clear here. I did not fall out of love with my wife. I did not stop loving my children. That's not what happened. But that feeling that you get from those things, the way those electrical impulses are interpreted by your brain, they were not being interpreted correctly. I remember when I was at my worst with clinical depression, when I would embrace my wife, and I've told her this since, but it would feel like I was hugging a stranger. That's the level of depression that I experienced. Also, when I was deeply clinically depressed, I had a lot of derealization and depersonalization. And I would say that if you want to know what things looked like, what the environment, what the ambiance was of my surroundings, it was dark and, just like, I don't know if you'd call it a horror movie or a science fiction movie, but something kind of like that. It didn't seem real. And then cherry on top, you don't feel what you should feel. So it was unimaginable. So I told you guys also, things I enjoy doing like exercising, nope. The panic attacks had already kind of quelled that anyways because, I was worried when my heart rate got up high that I was going to have a heart attack. Then I had put on a significant amount of weight. So that was a horrible aspect of it. So no exercise. Movies I enjoyed, like, I'm not a huge movie guy, but I do like movies. And I like watching them with certain people, especially, you know how it goes. With your wife, maybe you want to watch a romantic movie. With some friends, you want to watch a comedy. It all depends. But nothing like that. Nothing. No, I couldn't laugh at comedies. I just couldn't. It was like someone stole my feelings. That's why I say it's almost like your soul is stolen. Specifically, some things that happened anecdotally to me that were incredibly frightening were my wife ended up unfortunately having a miscarriage. And this is when I really started to realize how deeply depressed I was, because all throughout that, I tried my best to act appropriately, to show her the appropriate compassion, to be there, to be a shoulder to cry on, to be a supportive husband. It was difficult, just a very difficult thing to experience. And I felt like an actor in a movie. I felt like an actor in a movie. I didn't have the feeling, my normal feelings weren't there. And I love my wife enough, and I knew this in my head, where I basically was an actor in a movie. And it is such a scary and horrible feeling when things that you care deeply about are not evoking normal emotional responses. And that's what happens with clinical depression. I think that's one of the scariest aspects of it. And I think that's why some people decide to not be here anymore, because they feel like that's going to be a permanent condition. But guys, it's not. It's not going to be a permanent condition. Other things that happened. Another anecdote I can give you guys. It wasn't too long after that, my wife and I simultaneously had some health issues. They weren't life-threatening. I'm not going to disclose what they were, but they weren't life-threatening. But I was so clinically depressed that in my mind I started thinking about who was going to take care of our children after we died. And I wasn't sad about it. I wasn't anxious about it. I was just resigned to it. That's the kind of despair that you feel when you're clinically depressed. You don't care anymore. You can't care. There's nothing in there to get that feeling. That feeling of caring just isn't there. And so you'll have that. So I would have that. I remember feeling that. And then I also remember just crying, weeping for no reason at all. Sometimes it would happen in places where it would be really embarrassing too. So I had to sometimes, I think at least twice I left work because I didn't want to be, crying at work, have somebody come up to me and ask me what's going on. Nothing was going on. That's clinical depression. Anger can happen the same way with clinical depression. It was terrible. And, that's what I want you guys to understand, that feeling where nothing tastes like it should, nothing makes you feel any joy, nothing, and you're angry, you have outbursts, and you're crying for no reason. Those are the types of things. That's the type of way that I'm sure someone feels before they decide not to be here. And that is a temporary state. In fact, even without treatment, most likely that state will at least improve some. I'm not trying to encourage you guys not to get treatment, but just know, if you felt the way I'm describing, just know that is just par for the course with clinical depression. What I'm telling you guys is nothing extraordinary when it comes to clinical depression. Many people feel this exact same way. Just there's no, and there's things that will make it extra bad. Like I described the issue with my wife having the miscarriage. Also things that normally make you feel really good. When you feel nothing, like I'm the type of guy, it doesn't take a lot to make me happy. It never has. A nice day, going out on a nice day in the spring or early summer, a blue sky, that's pretty good for me. Day off, blue sky, I'm pretty stoked about that. Nothing. It was almost like there was a haze. I can't even explain that one, but it was almost like there was a haze in the atmosphere, something just to make it darker and awful. And a fair amount of simultaneous derealization and depersonalization during this time, which exacerbated the clinical depression. Just a really terrible thing. And so I had that bout, probably it started in 2005, and then that probably subsided a little bit. And then in 2007 into 2008, I had another bout. And this one was even worse. I don't know if the actual feeling of emptiness was worse, but I did start to experience more derealization and depersonalization. And the types of things you have a hard time doing when you're clinically depressed, guys, I'm not going to candy coat things. Personal hygiene can take a hit, and it did with me. Getting to work is extremely difficult. A lot of the time, getting out of bed is extremely difficult. Relationships, close relationships, are very hard to manage because when you feel like an actor in a movie, I'm not a disingenuous person. I did not like feeling like I was playing my wife's husband and not feeling like my wife's husband. It makes you not want to be around people. I isolated myself because who wants to be around people when you don't feel what you normally feel toward them? You're not feeling the connection you normally feel. You're not getting that feeling of love that you normally have. It is so insidious and so strange unless you have experienced it. So you end up isolating yourself. And then that's the other thing. Anything that normally makes, I remember movies, sports, anything I liked when I was clinically depressed, I withdrew from. And unfortunately, this included my wife and children, because you just don't want to equate this empty soul that you have with those things that you love so dearly, those things that make you happy, those things that bring you joy. And just a really difficult situation. I don't know if I'm articulating this exactly as well as I'd like to, but it was really tough. That second bout of depression, along with the derealization and the depersonalization and the return of panic attacks, is what finally drove me to try to get help again. So I guess in a way, it kind of led to my recovery. And that's the way I choose to look at it. I was able to work up the courage when I did not feel like a human being at that point to, ask my primary for help. He gave me a number, and that was the beginning of my recovery. And, if I had received that treatment 6 years earlier, I'd have I firmly believe you could add 6 more healthy years, or at least 5.5 more healthy years, mentally healthy years to my life. But that I'm not crying over spilled milk. I'm just grateful that I did finally get the help I needed. I was able to, within a year after seeing him, year and a half, I lost roughly 100 pounds. I had become, I remember one thing that made me feel so good. My wife, she said, we had a conversation. She goes, she says, you're starting to sound like you again. And man, that made me feel good, because I hadn't felt like myself for 6 years. And to hear her say that, it meant so much to me, especially after what I put her through and my children. So that's when I knew I was really on the road to recovery. And I haven't looked back. I've had a couple of relapses. Excuse me, guys, I apologize. I'm getting over a cold. I have had a couple of relapses, not so much with the clinical depression. I do have to guard against clinical depression, especially this time of year. Now, finally, the days are getting longer again, so that helps. But I do notice towards the end of winter, every year, if I'm not careful, I can start to feel some of those same feelings. Also, I'm not as able to be as active because, I live in the Northeast in upstate New York, and I'm not able to, this winter's been ridiculous as far as being able to do anything outside. So that can start to lead you in the direction, if you're already susceptible to clinical depression. And that's why I've also done a video on, seasonal affective disorder, because it can lead you in that direction. What I've noticed now, I always try to tell you guys, what I found to be helpful. When it comes to clinical depression, like I said, first of all, if you're clinically depressed, get treatment. You may need to take medication to help get the ball rolling in the right direction. That's been my experience. And then once you do, get your sleep pattern straightened out. That's number one. I talk about the big 3 all the time. Get your sleep, get your exercise, and get your diet under control. Those 3 things are going to have a tremendous impact on how quickly you recover from clinical depression and whether or not you ever have a relapse. I learned in 2020 what happens when you take away my ability to exercise and my ability to socialize and my ability to do exposure therapy and my ability to live and, have social interaction. That's when I ended up back in in a bit of a pickle with my mental health and had a relapse. So do those things, get treatment. And if you start to feel, this is another thing, and I talk about this in my videos too, really learn to compartmentalize and not catastrophize. If you have a day where you kind of feel like, well, I don't really care, just remember that's one day. Just remember that's one day. Don't catastrophize it into, oh, here we go again. Because those negative thought patterns that we learn when we're clinically depressed, when we're having panic attacks, when we're having generalized anxiety, those things sabotage our lives and they will make those things recur. Those thought patterns will make them recur, or at least make us susceptible for recurrence. So if you have a bad day or a bad week, or it's this time of year, I know I'm going to be a little down. I like being outside. I like doing things, and this time of year, it's really tough where I live. But you have to realize it. It's one day, it's 1 week, it's 1 month. Don't let it snowball. Don't let that feeling of hopelessness grow. And again, once you're already into a clinical depression, then it becomes very difficult because it really is more of an issue with neurotransmission and the way that everything's being interpreted at that point. Also, once you're clinically depressed, it's going to be extremely difficult to get sleep and exercise the way you should. It has a dramatic effect on those things. Now, there are some newer treatments for clinical depression that have shown some promise. I'm not going to touch on them in this video, but make sure you investigate everything. I think that when we have these conditions or any condition, you're a fool not to always look into different treatments, that may be evolving, that may be something that can be a real help in treating something like clinical depression. I know there's even there's one person I know who had some success with electric shock therapy in depression. It's something to do with redirecting the neural pathways. There are different treatments for depression, but guys, do educate yourselves, talk to a mental health professional, and, make sure you take care of yourself. Don't allow life to just bowl you over. If you have a job where you can't sleep, if you have a family situation where you can't exercise, if those are things that you feel like you have to make some modifications if you're having mental health issues. I'm just going to tell you, because you're not going to be able to do your job if you become clinically depressed or experience one of the major anxiety spectrum disorders. You're not going to be able to be a good husband, father, mother, daughter, anything if you develop one of these conditions either. If you're clinically depressed, you're going to be useless to your family. So, when we're thinking, oh, no, I don't have time, this is just, I got to do this. Once it starts affecting you to the point where you might need to seek treatment, you're going to have to make some changes. One thing I would do if I could go back, guys, some of my employment choices would be different. I know that especially the shifts I worked early on, definitely contributed to my mental health eroding to the point that it did. So this video's gone on longer than I wanted it to. Guys, if you feel as though you may be clinically depressed, go see a mental health professional. If that seems too scary for you, too daunting, at least tell a friend or someone you love and trust. Don't just if you're a man, don't try to be macho. Don't try to tough it out, because I think a lot of men with that attitude end up, unfortunately, doing something that you can't ever undo, and not being here anymore. So don't do that. You know, find somebody you can talk about. It's not, there should be no embarrassment at all. That is that's the sign of an intelligent person, knowing they need help, getting the help they need. And then once you do that, you can go on with your life, and then you also can help other people, because mental health, all these mental health issues are on the rise. Life is stressful. We're being inundated with things on the internet, from the news media, and from all these different places on a daily basis. It is definitely affecting people's mental health. We're staring at screens that's messing with our sleep. I could go on and on. So these mental health issues are not going to go away. So if you get into a position where you have overcome something like clinical depression, then you can help a friend. When you see a friend not acting right, and maybe you can draw them out, get them to tell you what's going on, so that they know. Because some of these things that I've experienced, I mean, I thought I was either losing my mind, or I don't know. It's like part of me died with clinical depression. Like I said, I felt like someone stole my soul. And that's a scary feeling. But to be able to find somebody that you can tell what's going on to, who can relate to it, who can steer you in the right direction, who can, a lot of the time what I found is just knowing what's going on causes a deep sense of relief. Because okay, this isn't permanent. I haven't lost my mind. This isn't psychosis. And there is a road to recovery. And, that's the whole purpose of my channel. That's why I did this video on depression and some of the things that I experienced that, again, are really scary. But you will, if you get treatment, you'll recover. Your feelings will go back. You're going to start to care the same way you used to about things that you care about, whether it's your job, your family, any of your hobbies, those loves and likes and interests, they will all come back. You'll get your soul back. And, that's the message I want to get out here, that clinical depression is treatable, and we don't want to lose any more people to this dreadful condition. And again, if you know somebody who is, maybe you think might be in this situation, or you're that person, get help. Tell a friend, and get yourself on the road to recovery. And remember, guys, it's temporary. So thank you guys so much for the engagement with the channel. I really appreciate it. All the comments. Like, share, subscribe. And until my next video, guys, take care.